Serious, Redditors who witnessed a murder. What is your story? Saw a guy push his passenger, an old man, out of a car. The car was screeching speeding round a corner. The door flings open and the driver very clearly pushed the old man out. Not the greatest thing for a 10-year-old to witness. The even weirder thing was that as I stood there in shock while the old man was completely still in the road, a weird man walking past me chuckled and said it wasn't you, is it, then chuckled again. It hasn't affected my life but think about it every now and then. I didn't actually witness the murder-suicide but I saw the direct aftermath seconds later. I was 6 years old at my babysitter's house after school. The husband came home drunk and demanded he speak with her in the backyard. A little bit afterwards their dog is freaking out demanding it come inside. I went out back and the dog lead me to them. The husband shot my babysitter and then himself. She was gone but he still had labored breathing before dying in front of me. It's still one of my most vivid memories 21 years later. When I was 10 my uncle murdered my mom's boyfriend at our house. It wasn't in the house but he chased him through our house and killed him outside in front of the house. It really destroyed a part of our family as well as relationship between my mom and grandmother. It was 30 years ago and I am only one alive besides my uncle that was there that night. I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and the questions. Kinda therapeutic to talk about. When my dad first moved to North Hollywood in the 80s. He woke up one morning to some guy getting beaten by 3 guys. One with a baseball bat. Across the street from his apartment. Police were called but the kid ended up dying on the scene and my dad watched it all from his bedroom window. I don't remember if he ever learned any more details. Welcome to the neighborhood. This was when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. So late 80s. My friend's mom had picked us up from school in her station wagon and I was in the way back. There were probably 6 or 7 of us kids in the car and we were stopped at a traffic light across from a homeless shelter. About to get onto the interstate. This guy is walking down the street with an armful of chewing tobacco and drops a pack. A homeless guy leaning up against the wall picked it up. There was an angry exchange in which the guy refused to give back the tobacco so the other guy kicked him and stomped him to death on the sidewalk. A drunk man was pushed down some stairs by the bouncer. Unfortunately, the drunk man was unable to catch himself and instead spun around and landed on the pavement with the back of his head making first contact. He was alive for a little while but quickly succumbed to his wound and arrested on the pavement. He was declared dead 15 minutes later in ED after being transported by ambulance. There was no CCTV or clear evidence of malicious intent that would hold up in court. And the man was known as a drunk and had no friends or family. It was ruled an accidental death. I had to walk past that spot most days going to work and will never forget his face. The look of mystified horror followed by the glassy-eyed slack-jawed expression that come with death. I was the medic that transported the man. I was by his side from start till the declaration. One of the most visceral experiences of my career thus far. Obviously a lot of lead up to the story but I'm not going there. My girlfriend was taking her dog for a walk while I got showered for work. I'm in the bathroom when I hear voices coming from outside. I look out the window and to my horror there is my girlfriend talking to her abusive stepfather, who is standing about 5 feet away from her. I couldn't hear what they were saying but I knew it wasn't good. Stepfather raises his shotgun. Shoots my girlfriend in the face then shoves shotgun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Murder-suicide. Life's never been the same for me since. Lots of messages so I wanted to say this. Thank you all for the support. It was 20 years ago and though I'll never get over it I can live with it. It took nearly 2 years before I came to realize there was nothing I could have done to stop it. I will never forgive her family for knowing what that man was doing to her and they did nothing about it. I'm not really good with words but I wanted to thank everyone for the kindness and support. I was around 8-9 years old and we were on a vacation in a vacation village. While we were doing checkout with my family, my father was at the desk while we were waiting at the lobby couches. An argument broke out between 2 guys who were at the lobby bar. I actually don't know what it was about. Because it was in another language. One of the guys grabbed a bottle, smashed it and attacked the other one. Hit him in the neck. That guy fell on the floor. And there were blood all over the place. My mother closed my eyes after that. And took us out while other people get involved. Years later I've learned that guy lost his life. In the parking lot of a strip mall in Washington state, a guy walked into a jewelry store and did an armed robbery. Plainclothes security guard waited until the robber exited and shot the robber in the back. I was in a car and I didn't hear the shot, but I did see him fall and some shoppers gathering around his body. We drove by slowly to see if help was needed. When I saw how fast the pool of blood was spreading, I pretty much knew he would not survive. I live in Syria and I've been forced to leave my house due to ISIS attacks on our city. My family and I lived for 2 days under light artillery between ISIS soldiers and regime-affiliated troops that lived in the neighborhood. As I looked through the window, I saw an ISIS soldier running with a rocket launcher screaming. Then there was a hole in the building in front of him and the 3 men inside were blown to pieces. He quickly got shot in the chest and laid on the ground. Dead. Oddly enough. And lucky for me, this incident didn't make a permanent damage on my well-being. I saw my cousin murdered when I was a kid. We were back in my hometown. He was sitting in his car in front of my aunt's house and he was gunned down. I was on the porch with his siblings. It was random, but he didn't live the most righteous life, so we honestly never know the motive and they never found out who did it. When I was 6, my family went to see Sesame Street on Ice downtown. When we were leaving, a little girl my age was struck by a van and dragged across the parking lot. I remember the mother jumping on the windshield screaming at the driver while the van was still moving. My mom was a nurse and was helping until the ambulance arrived, but she was already dead. I can still remember the screams and lifeless body of that little girl. This was over 30 years ago. Was going to work one day when a van hit a cyclist. Saw the person fly through the air, looked like a mannequin. I kept talking to the body. But with blood coming from his ears, I knew he was dead. Unfortunately, they never released the name of the victim. I would have liked to have visited the grave. Some of the other witnesses were messed up. But I was, and still am, okay with it. I read that one's hearing is the last thing to go. If I am ever in that bad situation again, I will talk more conversationally. Worked in a pub when I was younger. Walking round cleaning tables and emptying ashtrays. Back in the days you could smoke indoors. And a couple of guys are standing at a high table talking. Another guy comes in and starts shouting with one of the group. Getting a bit heated, so I go over to ask them to calm it down and remove all empty glasses and bottles from the area. As I'm talking to them, the lone guy lunges with a knife. Misses me but goes in the chest of the other. He moves into a bear hug with the guy he just stabbed and continues to stab him a further 14 times in the back before running out the building. Spent what seemed like hours putting pressure on the stab wounds waiting for an ambulance, but the guy was dead before they got there. Police caught the guy. I gave a statement and spent a few days in court giving evidence and helping get the guy jailed. Not something I ever want to experience again, as it ate me up for quite some time. Used to work at a movie theater. I would change the sign near the road in the middle of the night. I saw a taxi pull up to the bus stop. It stayed there for quite some time. That's what caught my attention, was how long it was there for. Saw a dude get out and quickly walk away. A week later I was changing the sign again and I hear a voice below asking me to come down. After he showed me his badge I obliged and he asked if I had seen anything weird the week before. I replied only that a taxi had sat there for a while and a guy got out. I had to then go look at lots of mugshots. Turns out I was the sole witness to some poor bastard's murder without even realizing it. Wish I had a better look at the guy so I could get him some justice. Was at a bar. Couple guys got into an argument. The whole thing subsides. Then a few hours later one of them leaves. As the guy is leaving, the other guy he was arguing with earlier runs outside and punches him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. Only other time I've seen someone die was on the highway, not murder here. Guy jumped off a bridge I was driving under. Had a rope tied off and hanged himself. Got smashed by a truck before he died though. Caused a really big mess. Hell, maybe the rope broke his neck before getting plowed into. IDK. An old neighbor of mine. Was 6'5" and like 250 pounds. Got smacked on the head with a bottle at a bar and got permanent brain damage because he told a guy to off for hitting on his girlfriend. He now has difficulty talking and has trouble remembering how to do menial tasks some days. Avoid arguments at bars if you can. You never know how they may impact your life. Was in an Islamic State suicide attack. 78 fatalities. 500 wounded. The screaming is something that will be with me forever. When I was a kid, I witnessed a hit and run. An SUV ran into a pedestrian and sped away. I don't think they ever caught the person. The poor girl they hit flew into the air. The SUV passed underneath her. She landed on the road and she died. It was heartbreaking. She couldn't have been over 25 years old. Granted, this wasn't murder. But I just couldn't believe there was a person there 1 second and then gone the next. It always made me wonder how people could live with themselves after doing that. Then I'd wonder how many people I knew would do the same thing. Eventually I wondered if I was capable of doing something like that too. All it's made me realize is hypotheticals are dumb because we really never are who we think we are. I also appreciate every year I get older. 5 years ago. There was an attempted home invasion at my house when I was 18. I was downstairs watching Top Gear when I hear somebody trying to break in the door. My father, military type, very protective, confronted the guy and the guy turned around and shot my dad in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun. My dad was able to fire off a couple shots afterwards, killing him. But my father already was on the ground dead. This is the very short version. First time writing this out. Still surreal to think about. Turned out the guy was a felon with 6 butcher knives down his pants. Presumably trying to find some reason to hurt someone. I consider my father a hero. Most people considered his actions stupid or irresponsible, local internet commenters, but you had to know him to understand his mentality. If you want the full detailed story and my recovery, or if you're struggling with PTSD, PM me. Edit. I was 5 feet behind my father the whole time. Will never forget holding my father in my arms. Holding his gunshot wound. Thank you everyone for such kind words. Really makes me think. Thank you so much. Pop pop pop. Fireworks on Halloween? That's weird, but whatever. Pop pop pop. Oh. It's someone dead in a car. I should call 911. For me. The surprising thing was just how anticlimactic the experience was. It was just surreal. I don't know if they ever caught the guy. But it was a drug-related murder. The murderer was in the car with him, so it was probably someone the victim trusted. Saw my friend get shot in the head and died a few minutes later during a crossfire between her oldest brother and the police. Was very heartbreaking. I still miss her 22 years later. We were playing on a field next to her house and her brother was watching us. He pulled a gun out. Started shooting as soon as he saw the police. I didn't think this would get a lot of attention. Thank you for all the awards and all the happy cake days. For the ones who posted on here. For some reason I cannot see them on the post. But thank you. Sorry if I have not replied to everyone. In the 1980s. I was touring the ship Queen Mary, which was permanently docked at Long Beach, CA. They were hosting a motorcycle show on board that day. And the idiots had hired the Hells Angels as security. Open staircases were attached to the ship on the outside, allowing one to climb from the pavement level to entryways at any level of the ship. I was standing on the lowest landing of the staircase, about 10 feet above ground, when the rival Mongols Motorcycle Club showed up. Of course a brawl broke out. Immediately below me. With knives, fists, and chains. I saw a Mongol stab a Hells Angel in the back just as a string of police cars were coming over the causeway to break it up. I read in the paper that night that the Hells Angel had been stabbed in the kidney and had died. Surprisingly, it was the only fatality of the brawl. Edit. Corrected which club member had killed which. The first day I moved to the town I grew up in, 3 years old. I went to Burger King and saw two men get into an argument while I was in line, having to do with a gang rivalry I believe. And it escalated to the point where one of the men pulled out a gun. And within another minute or two it had been fired off and the other guy was on the ground bleeding out. My mom told me to look away, but that's the most impactful few peeks I've ever snuck. And those few images will always stick with me. I was in Terminal 2 in Barcelona airport the morning of the 24th of March, 2015. There were only 3 flights leaving the terminal. And we were all delayed due to fog. 150 people boarded Germanwings flight 9525. 30 minutes before we boarded our flight. Although I didn't see it happen. We were the last people to see them alive. The first officer crashed the plane into the French Alps, killing himself and murdering the other 149 people on board. It will haunt me for the rest of my life. When I was around 12, my friend and I were tossing a football back and forth in the street. His parents were having one of their screaming matches when his mother burst out of the screen door. She made it about halfway across the street before there was the boom of a shotgun and down she went. I was standing at a crosswalk. The guy next to me started walking. It was pre-dawn. And without looking, so did I. The guy behind me grabbed my collar and yanked me back to the sidewalk. I spun around head off. The guy in front of me got hit by a car speeding through the intersection. I freaked out and called 911. But the guy died before the ambulance got there. The guy that pulled me back was gone. White guy. Sunglasses. Tan coat. Guy that got hit was fit as hell. Wearing a grey windbreaker. The same thing happened to my grandma. She was running errands in town and was standing on a corner waiting to cross. Traffic cleared a bit and she wasn't really paying attention. So she started to walk across the street. She felt a strong hand grab her shoulder and pull her back to the curb, just as a bus came careening by. She turned around to thank whoever it was. But there was no one there. She claimed it was an angel till the day she died. So I don't know what the legality is. Maybe it's considered manslaughter or I don't know. That's what lawyers are for. I see this happen more than I'd like to admit. I work for a company that puts cameras on utility trucks, mostly garbage trucks. So what will happen is, there will be like a 2-lane road and the helper on the back will attempt to cross to road to grab a bin. And either a car coming the other direction will hit him. Or even worse, a car from behind the truck will attempt to pass and hit him. Saw this twice last month. Bus in Poland with big side mirrors. Went up on the curb a bit when attempting to pull into the bus stop lay-by at the tram station. Mirror took out a guy waiting for the bus. Slammed him in the head and killed him right there. Bus driver tried to drive away. Bus passengers tried to stop him. Bus ran over someone rude, but I don't know if they died too. Our tram had already started moving and left the station. We all dialed 112. And apparently police and ambulances got there pretty fast. I don't know what happened to the bus driver. All the dozen or so murders I've seen in person have been when I'm visiting my hometown in Mexico. They've all more or less panned out the same from what I saw. Some bickering which lead to someone pulling out a knife or gun and killing the other person. And all of these occurred in fairly crowded areas. Later that week I would find out it was organized crime related. Whoever got done in was in hostile territory or under suspicion of messing around on their turf or members. P.S. If asked what did you see, just reply with, I didn't see. I don't know what you're talking about. Has worked for me on more than one occasion. Welp. I was smoking a blunt on my friend's back porch one night when we heard a massive boom. Down the road, an Audi full of joyriding kids had slammed into a family's minivan as they pulled out of a 7-Eleven. The kids in the Audi were fine, despite blitzing down the road at about 60. And scattered immediately after the wreck. The driver of the van died there on the spot. And a little girl bled out before the EMTs could save her. Her screams grew fainter and fainter until they stopped. I'm calling it a murder cause those inconsiderate assholes took human lives through callousness and fled like cowards. I used to live in a real bad neighborhood that had a lot of drugs and gang violence. I swear that street had been shut down due to drug lab raids at least twice a year. There was a drug dealer who lived across the street and had a really nice green Dodge Charger that I loved. One night, I guess a drug deal went wrong. And I heard a lot of yelling. So I look out the window and I see the car up in flames. A few days as I'm getting home I see the same guy running down the street as 3-4 guys are chasing him with. One of the guys caught up to him and beat him to death with a baseball bat. We moved out within the year. I was in my car. At a traffic light. Guy crossing the street recognized the driver of car on my 90 right. Takes out the gun and shoots him through the front window. Driver manages to exit the car. Stumbles to the middle of traffic crossing. Drops and dies. Found out later in the news driver was the new boyfriend of killer's former GF. Seeing a dude die like this said with my head for few weeks at least. As a child. I saw a beheading. As a child. I also saw a man shoot a bazooka at a bus full of people. Think Southeast Asia and how overloaded the buses there are. Direct hit. 2011. Leavenworth. KS. I was in the military at the time. And a few of us decided to go off post to ball around the local Walmart. On the way back. We were driving when we heard shots. Having the training we had. We immediately knew it was a firearm. And not some fireworks or whatever. Turned to look. And there was a man running around cars in a barbershop parking lot. Trying to evade gunfire. Needless to say, he didn't make it. A few months later, I got out. Went home. About a year later, the Leavenworth County prosecutor called. Said I had to go back and testify. Felt like I was being watched the whole time I was in town. Haven't been back since. I've done horrible things. And seen horrible things. But one of the worst is the sound of the victim's mother screaming in court as I described her son's death to a judge. I'm rough. I had the opportunity to support NATO activities within Kosovo. There was an internal struggle going on and I was given specific instructions not to interfere with local life. And not to deploy a weapon unless fired on. We weren't supposed to allow our presence to be noticed. The team I was assigned hooked up with NATO people and we were being escorted to the location they wanted us. En route. We went through a market and there was a soldier with gun who was yelling at this woman and child. I don't know what was being said. I don't speak the language. The soldier opened fire and killed the woman. The child. And a few others. We took cover and waited for him to leave. I was told he was Kla and the Kla were ethnic cleansing Serbians. Within days the US Navy was launching Tomahawk strikes at the area. My neighborhood is pretty wild so there are probably even better stories but the one I remember is this. It was about 5 years ago. This gang leader man, he was a big deal. Mafia connections and stuff, had just got released from prison. I don't know much about the backstory but he had some dirt with a nightclub owner that happened to be my neighbor. The gang attacked the nightclubs at night. Tables were thrown off windows. Fire alarm went on and we obviously heard gunshots back to back. Me and my dad rushed to the balcony, very dumb of us, and we saw this naked guy with only a towel around his waist who was walking out of hammam. Hammam is like a public bath. I'm Turkish. It's common here. The man ran to the nightclub big he was just curious and then boom. I saw the exact moment he got shot from his chest. We later found out he was the only one who died that night. Nobody inside the nightclub was harmed.